Let's turn back to domestic matters. The Labour Party will today try and force the government to provide more support for victims of the cladding scandal. They're calling for the establishment of a national cladding task force to investigate exactly how many properties are currently at risk. We do have estimates. 4.6 million flats are estimated to be unsellable due to dangerous cladding. The government, for its part, has set aside £1.6 billion to remove unsuitable cladding on buildings in the UK. But that only covers buildings taller than 18 metres. The Housing Secretary, Robert Jenrick, told Sky News the government is working towards a solution.
Now there are workers on site in every single one of the buildings that have got dangerous cladding, ACM cladding, on them in the social sector, and about 95% of those that are privately owned. But there's still further to go, and I'm working very intensely with the Chancellor and the Prime Minister to develop a comprehensive package, and we expect to be announcing that very soon.
We're joined now on the programme by William Martin, a junior doctor and co-founder of the UK Cladding Action Group. He lives in a block with faulty cladding. William, great to have you on the programme this morning. I suppose let us start straight away with the conditions that you find yourself in and how that must be, going to sleep every night knowing that there are risks to your safety because of the place that you live.
Yeah, it's pretty unimaginable. It's really hard to communicate to anyone that's not in this situation just how scary it is going to bed every night in a building like this and worrying about my own safety. And the mental health impact that it's having on my life and many other people's lives is, you just cannot really put a measure on how much of an impact this is having on people.
Give us an idea then of the financial impact on you. You bought your flat back in 2015, I'm told.
Yes, I bought it in 2015, and a week afterwards, after Grenfell, we found out that we'd got the same type of cladding as Grenfell, and then we found out subsequently that we've got other problems as well. And we've got £6.2 million worth of works that need to be done on the building, and they are unfunded by the government, and that works out at £52,000 each for everyone in the building. So those costs are absolutely unaffordable, and no loan scheme, which is what the government seem to be proposing, no loan scheme will ever make that affordable.
And you find yourself in a situation where even if you wanted to, presumably, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, for you to sell the place.
Well, absolutely. I mean, until the building's made safe, my building's completely unsellable and is valued at zero. So I have had my life on hold for 3.5 years now, and it's miserable. I just want to move on with my life. And the government has dragged their heels so much over the last 3.5 years. It has taken so long for us to arrive at the point of today where it is, getting national attention. And the government will churn out the facts and figures and say, like Robert Jenrick has just done, saying £1.6 billion has been released. But the fact of the matter is, even themselves have admitted that this is just completely inadequate. Estimates are at £15 billion needed to make this problem go away. And we're not asking for taxpayer money to be used to solve this problem. We're asking for the government to put levies on the developers that cause this problem. They're making billions of pounds and have got away scot-free from this, and it's a disgrace.
How much additionally, if you can kind of put a figure on it, how much additionally are you having to pay every month for the protections that we've been hearing stories about fire marshals? I don't know if this is the situation with your building, but I'm sure you're having to pay something extra. So
we pay £7,000 a week for a waking watch, which works out at £3,000 a year each. Now, I'm a junior doctor, and that's 8 weeks of my working year that I spend entirely working just for a man to patrol my building. And that is it's just so insulting. My service charges have gone up by over 100%, and my insurance has gone up by 60%. These costs are not affordable to me or anyone else in my building. And even if any one person has enough money to luckily remediate their proportion of the building, it requires everyone in the building to have that money available, which is just never going to happen. And so these buildings will remain unsafe, and there will be another Grenfell in a building like mine at some point in the future, and it will be on the government's watch.
So when you hear people like Robert Jenrick and others within government suggesting, look, we do not want the costs to be passed over to the leaseholders. We would prefer for the developers to be picking these up, for the freeholders to be picking them up, but there's no means of compelling it. How does that make you feel?
Well, it's just empty words. They've said it 15 times. They've said it continually over the last 3.5 years. But the fact of the matter is, I'm here living proof that I am paying for these costs and they are breaking us. And they can say it as much as they want. They often say wherever possible. Well, the fact of the matter is, the majority of the time, it's not possible, and it is being passed on to leaseholders. So direct central government action needs to take place to make this stop, because their words are not being heeded and listened to by the developers. The developers are laughing, knowing that they're under no obligation to fix these buildings.
William, I'm told that until relatively recently you were working on a COVID ward within the NHS, and for that, fair play and thank you. But given that, I wonder, if I gave you the opportunity to speak directly to Robert Jenrick right now, what would you say?
I'd say that as a key worker on the front line, coming home and finding out that I'm paying £7,000 a week for a waking watch, it is a slap in the face, and it shows a great lack of understanding of the problem that we as leaseholders are facing. There are so many things that I'd love to say to Robert Jenrick. I think the other thing that's really important to point out to your viewers at home is that right now we're in a national lockdown and we're being asked to stay at home in our unsafe homes. So millions of leaseholders are sat at home having to stay there 24/7, in these unsafe buildings.
We wish you well. William Martin, thanks for joining us in the programme this morning. I will let's speak now appropriately enough to the Shadow Housing Secretary, Thangam Debbonaire, joining us on the programme. Great to have you on. Well, let's get straight to it. The National Cladding Task Force. To my eyes, it looks quite similar to that scheme that the state of Victoria in Australia has moved forward with pretty well. Just take us through it.
Well, I have in fact been consulting with people in Australia about their scheme. And the thing that matters here is people like William. I just want to start with the human impact. He showed just exactly what people are going through. Your heart goes out to him. This is young people on their first purchase of a home on the housing ladder. It's people approaching retirement. It's key workers like William. Now, the Australian Cladding Task Force in the state of Victoria, they've got powers to inspect, to do risk assessments, to provide funding and to enforce works. And that's what we want the Cladding Task Force here to be able to do. It's important that that's done urgently, because the lives like people like William are on hold waiting for this to be sorted. 3.5 years on from the tragedy of Grenfell, it's atrocious that there are still so many people stuck in this situation, and also the wider number of people who are stuck in what is effectively now a broken housing market in flats of this type. That could be affecting around 4.5 million apartments and properties, as I think you mentioned. This cannot go on, and we're calling on all MPs, wherever they sit across the House, to vote with us today to show that we have a consensus, to show the leaseholders and the residents across the country that we believe in them and we want them to be safe.
Could we talk just first and foremost then about the bottom line? Under Labour's plans, who would be paying then for the removal of this dangerous cladding, be it the type that was on Grenfell or the numerous other types which have been identified as fire risk?
Well, let's start with the fact that it shouldn't be the residents. If you bought a car and it turned out to be dangerously defective, you wouldn't be expected to take out a loan of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 pounds to fix it. So the burden needs to be taken from them. That's the first principle. The second principle is that the polluter should pay. And that's an industry that it needs to be tackled. It needs to be taken into hand. And I think that the government's perfectly capable of looking at the scheme that they got in Australia, other proposals that there are, for instance, by the Leasehold Knowledge Partnership, who former Bank of England economist has come up with another bond scheme. What matters is that neither the leaseholder nor the taxpayer should be left responsible for the industry's mistakes that they need to fix.
I understand the analogy with buying a car that is dangerous. I get that. But when these properties were developed, they were done so within the regulations that the government had provided. So why is it the developer and not the government that should be paying for these repairs?
Well, the government is actually the taxpayer, and I think that, you know, we know that developers are still able to make profits. I think that there's ways of spreading that burden fairly across the whole of the industry, but I think we should be following that principle of the polluter paying and making sure that no matter who it is that bears the cost, it shouldn't be the leaseholders and the residents, that the taxpayer should be protected. And there are schemes, whether it be levies or bonds or changes of legislation. If we need to change legislation, so be it. We're Parliament, we can do that. But today, this is about setting out a roadmap, a plan for the future, which shows people out there like William that we're on their side.
Thangam Debbonaire, great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.